Hello, everyone. Adam Parks here with another episode of Receivables Roundtable. Today, I'm here with my friend Nabil Foster, who is a shareholder and the attorney managing the Chicago office for Barron Newburger. How you doing today, Nabil?
I'm doing fine, Adam. Sorry. There's some sirens in the background. Big city Chicago. This is what happens. There's always an emergency somewhere. So sorry if there are more sirens in the background there, friend.
That's all right. We appreciate you coming on live from Chicago today. I've had the opportunity to get to know you a little bit through the years, and we have a lot of really technical kind of legal discussions. And I always learn a whole lot from that. So I appreciate you coming on and having a chat with me on the podcast today. But for anyone who's not as lucky as me and hasn't had the opportunity to spend some time with you personally, can you tell everyone a little bit about yourself and how you got to the seat that you're in today?
Sure, Adam. Well, first, thanks for having me on. I've watched your series. I think it's interesting and informative, and you always bring good content for the industry. So your leadership and the services you provide people people respect your opinion. So happy to be here. Who am I, and how did I get to where I am? So my name's Nabil Foster. I work in Chicago. I work for a law firm called Barron Newburger. I came into the receivables industry probably back in 2007. I came into it from doing legal malpractice, medical malpractice, commercial litigation. I worked for a small firm back then. Mm-hmm. Then I moved to a larger firm, and then found my way, into the hyper technical world of consumer class action lawsuits and and regulations. And I mean, this industry is so heavily regulated, yet there's so many gray areas and areas where they change one thing and then it creates ambiguity elsewhere and leaves people sort of sitting and just scratching their head and trying to figure out an answer, because people just want to run a business, want to do it in compliance with the law. But gosh darn it, good luck trying to get a straight answer out of a regulator or sometimes with, regulation changes. So I've learned a lot over these years in this industry. And what can I say? I like defending lawsuits. There are a lot of good actors out there. Now there's some bad actors. Okay. But fortunately, I tend to defend good actors, and the bad actors, they don't usually find their way to us. So my law firm, I work with Manny Newburger. Almost everybody in the industry knows Manny Newburger. So, I've known him for 15 years. Like, I came into the industry. He's one of the first people I met at a conference, because he's there, he's sociable, and he knows lots of things. And, I came over just from my old firm and to open the Chicago office during the pandemic, and it's been great ever since. Sorry, that's a long-winded answer. But
I think it's
background.
It's a great story, and I think that you've done quite a few different things leading up into. I know this is kind of the abbreviated version, because I know that your kind of storied background prior to becoming a lawyer and then working your way through the legal field, I think is really an incredible story. And working for Manny, that's got to be an interesting. It's got to be a lot of fun, because I know I always learn something from every interaction that I have with Manny, and whether it be about his worldly travels or whatever. But I really do enjoy getting to know him through the years. But for anybody who's not familiar with the firm, and I know pretty much our whole audience is, but can you tell everyone a little bit about Barron Newburger and what you guys do there?
Sure. Barron Newburger has been around since 1981. It's headquartered in Austin, Texas, and we've got offices spread out around the country. We're a small firm. I think we're like 21 lawyers, and we cover a wide range of states and jurisdictions, because we hire people who know what they're doing, right? It's not a training ground for people who have no idea the interest. So we focus on, consumer class action, consumer finance space, legal malpractice, advising lawyers with ethics issues. We've got a creditors' right, bankruptcy, national bankruptcy practice. We've got a data privacy practice out of our Houston office. So we tend to provide services that are complementary. So, for example, you got it's a collection agency or a collection law firm or a debt buyer, right? They're going to have data privacy issues, right? They're going to have regulation compliance. So another portion of the defense services we provide is we help our clients avoid problems by giving them good compliance counseling regarding their changes, my earlier comment about trying to get a straight answer, we talk to regulators on a regular basis about questions that clients have, because it's easier sometimes to put that through a lawyer rather than going directly to a regulator. Not well, there's some entities that they're big enough they have their own communication, their own lines of
Mm.
communication. But
No, I
but
think it's a doing those through attorneys and those communications from a regulatory standpoint, I think are important, for especially for those of us that are not trying to get clarification without painting a target on your back. So I think that creates a very important function from a
that's
business
important.
owner
Yes.
standpoint, right? Like, because it's creating a degree of separation for you to be able to access the information that ultimately should be publicly available anyway.
Yep.
But such is life. Which leads me, your kind of your background from a technology standpoint and from a regulatory and legal standpoint, I think is very interesting. Which leads me to kind of our topic for today, which is talking a little bit about artificial intelligence and how that kind of buzzword is having an effect from a regulatory standpoint and what we might expect to see coming down in the future. So let me start with kind of the higher level, and let's talk a little bit about artificial intelligence, machine learning, and large language models. And my question is a little bit long-winded, but I want to talk a little bit about kind of where these things intersect and the fundamental misunderstanding that I think a lot of organizations have between what those three things actually are, right? The artificial intelligence, the machine learning, and then obviously talking about kind of some of this generative AI and where all that goes. But from the government standpoint, they're looking at this mishmash of new tools, and feels like everyone's going to try and get their slice of the regulatory pie, so to speak.
Yes.
How do you think these things are going to start to unfold over the coming, let's call it 24 months? Now that these things are starting to get deployed very quickly.
Yes. Well, that's a question. Clients often go to lawyers asking us to look into our crystal ball to tell you what's around the corner. I get it. I understand. I understand. Everyone wants to know that, and it's it sometimes it's hard to tell me, like, um you know I don't have X-ray vision. I can't see
Mhm,
around the corner any more than you, but I can tell you what some of the risks are
mhm,
and the ambiguities. And sometimes that's a proxy for, okay, what might be around the corner. The problem with AI and that, well, first of all, those three words those three terms you get, those are new terms in our collective vocabulary.
mhm.
18 months ago, large language learning model, that didn't exist. People,
Yeah,
if you said that, people had no idea what we're talking about. Machine
agreed.
learning,
Yeah.
again, people look at you like quite frankly, the only I speak on this topic to other lawyers and trade associations, and for example, I'm talking to a collection of healthcare lawyers soon
Mhm,
about legal ethics and artificial intelligence, because, as you might imagine, with HIPAA and other things, there's a lot of issues about data privacy and what's happening and what's being used and where AI is going to be introduced. The biggest problem in general for lawyers is that their clients are trying to find ways to push AI into every process that they might have, because let's just say there's some clients who believe that AI is sort of like the new magic elixir, and it's like, oh, this is a problem for solving HR problems,
it's the
for
snake
getting rid
oil.
of personnel who don't follow policies, and like the
Mhm,
idea is that if you have a machine that does something that a person can do, well, maybe it's more reliable. The problem is that the technology is still in the early stages, and there's some cases where it's really unpredictable.
mhm,
There are articles on a regular basis of studies what's called AI hallucination, right?
mhm,
It's There are studies where they take a fixed set of facts and they ask one of the generative AI engines to summarize the facts, so it's a closed system, right?
mhm,
And depending on which system, how it's built, how it's learned, what it's learned, it invents facts that aren't even in the facts that are presented to be
mhm.
summarized. Like, it's like, where did that come from? And everyone's correct. Sorry, there's another siren going past.
That's
I'm
okay.
telling you, it's a
Welcome to
lively, like, was it
Chicago.
a two? It's a Monday. It's a Monday morning, and sorry, but
It's okay.
the AI stuff, where's it coming down? It's going to be a case by case basis, because it's sort of like that game whack a mole. It's
Mhm,
like whichever one is sort of popping up and getting attention, that's where the regulators are probably going to point their attention and start to look into it. When I was in law school, I worked for the SEC for a summer in the enforcement division, And I learned about how some of those agencies, in particular SEC, how they how they find things to investigate, to look at. And one of
Mm.
the sources, guess what, is the newspaper, right? Things that are getting attention, you know, they're not sitting there omniscient, like, oh, they know what everything's going on. They read the newspaper just like everybody else. And there's something going on and there's attention, it draws attention. So if the chat GPT, whatever, whatever AI engine people are using or product, if there's something that's popping up, it's going to draw the attention. So therefore it's like, that's where, and who knows which agency, which alphabet soup agency is going to take an interest in that. And I don't want to dip into the whole
You open up
politics area,
some
but it's like who needs headlines, who needs to show they're doing something. That all kind of factors into it. Thank goodness we have a really good civil service, category of individuals. Not everybody's a political appointee. Thank goodness. Otherwise, nothing to get done.
Right. Oh, well, I'm not even going to get started down that path, but you do bring up a really interesting point, which is when we talk about these large language models and we talk about kind of open versus closed models, right? One of the things that we see is that intersection of artificial intelligence, large language models, and data privacy. So I know for a lot of organizations, and we can, again, talking about things that have drawn attention, we'll use Samsung as an example of an organization that took, proprietary secret information like trade secrets, plug them into one of these models, and it became part of the model itself, right? And so you could
Yep.
ask the model for that information, it would return that information or would use it in its collective thinking going forward. But how does a bank or a financial institution go and deploy this kind of technology without running the same risks, right?
Without, say that again, without.
How does a bank or a financial institution go about actually executing on using something like a ChatGPT or any large language model without breaching the confidentiality and data privacy requirements that they?
The answer is very, very carefully. So,
Yeah, right.
I mean,
Create a
it's like the
policy,
doc.
maybe like think it through before you just start throwing data at it, something along those lines.
Yeah, a lot of organizations have simply issued policies of prohibiting their employees from using any of the generative AI tools that may be out there, because
Mm,
each workstation, depending on your cybersecurity policies, um, each workstation is essentially a access point or a weak point in your cyber defenses. And if you got somebody who's using one of these tools and they're going to a website and it seems useful, but it's either sending the information out or it's creating a portal, and there's a problem. So if there's more data leak, um, generally, I think most of those financial institutions and the healthcare institutions are really, really skeptical, and so
mm.
they are. They can't deny that business is going to press them. They want to do things, but it's going to be, they're going to be really cautious. So you're going to see the adoption of these things more in businesses that aren't so data sensitive. Although you and I have talked about this before, it's going to get to a point where almost everybody's going to be considered a data broker, right? It's just, there's so much flow of
I think
information.
we're kind of at that point under the definitions and the rulemaking now. I mean, I think my great aunt Sally is a data broker apparently because she has a list of recipes that came from multiple people. So I mean, hey, look, we can get as extreme with this, but I think that is a very realistic issue that everyone's going to face, especially if they're starting to leverage data that's within these large language learning models. So if you're going to start using a chat GTP or something else that has consumed that information, what risks do you then run? Which I think is going to be a major challenge. But I think let me ask you this: from a deployment standpoint, have you seen a lot of business use cases to where groups have successfully deployed generative AI in the financial services space?
Uh,
And that
no.
may be a little bit too proprietary. You could define.
Yeah, but I can say generally no. And I'll give you an example of um, that the risk involved in using one of these generative AIs to, let's say, you want to create some new set of collection letters, right? And you're like, oh,
Mm,
wouldn't it be great if you took Reg F, right? All that stuff, and you put that there, and then you said you put the other stuff that you want in the letter, and you want to put in your website and the payment portal and phone number, and you're like, write a collection letter, right? With all the appropriate
these
disclosures, right?
factors, yeah.
So you do that, right? And then what do you get? Generally, you're going to get crap,
You're gonna get an
It's just,
unformatted jumble. Yeah.
yeah, jumble. So therefore, it's, it's I think the desire, the wish that people can imagine the implementation. That's far ahead of where the technology actually is,
Hmm.
and the problem is that it's going to take a few iterations and for things to become a little bit better. I give an example. Here's a little bit of '90s trivia, right? So the Mozilla Firefox browser, right, the one that's out now, um, it was a spinoff from what '90s popular web browser, right? So, play your Jeopardy music. And I know your eyes looking. Does anybody remember Netscape Navigator?
Yes,
Netscape Navigator was the back in the '90s. Remember, there's a time when the internet didn't exist. All right. So
I was
way
there.
back when, there was a time at which if you wanted to access the internet, right, which
Yeah.
people you use dial up,
You
the
did the dial-up
modems,
ISP. Yeah.
exactly. And you needed a web browser. And it was, Netscape was the one that dominated. I mean, it was the end all be all at the time. Like the internet and Netscape Navigator were synonymous, right?
Yeah.
Now you ask that of people here, like, what is it? Like they never heard of it. This is a story that things evolve. So
Mhm.
that first generation of web browsers, it was not particularly secure. You could get some stuff up there. There's nothing dynamic about it, what have you, but it was brand new. It was exciting. Now, if you were to implement Netscape Navigator now, people will look at you like you're crazy. Like it can't handle any of the programming languages that exist
Mhm.
now in terms of the thing. Now, on the one hand, someone might say it's a whole lot more secure because it can't run any of the code in the background that causes threats. But realistically speaking, the technology has advanced. So where it is now, what you get out of these generative AI models, even the private closed loop ones, you know, there is no way any of that stuff is prime time ready until there's a set of human eyes who knows what they're talking about to look at it and to see it. So AI, like almost any
That
other
I
type of,
think is
it's a
the
tool.
key. Right. Well,
Yeah.
I think that becomes the key with the deployment of AI from an operation standpoint is that it's not an independent tool at this point, meaning you
Yes.
can't just set it loose and it's going to go accomplish these things. But I think it is a tool that can be used by individuals to enhance their work, right? It's one thing to write a paper, or to look for citations or to use the tool in bite-sized chunks for what it's good at. I think over the different iterations and over time, you'll start to find um, more ways to use those iterations, right? Like more ways to use the tool set, and that will, right? And then the gaps between the use of the tool will start to
Hmm.
deteriorate, but that's going to take a significant amount of time. Now,
Yep.
with the large language models and creating these restrictive areas, as I've kind of learned through my experiences, that you can actually put some borders around these things, but that comes with a cost, or you have to have a machine that's capable of running these types of models independently. And I can tell you that's not a inexpensive investment. Being able to run those models and for you to determine what it is that you're going to train on that model and all of that, I think that there is going to be a lot of different uses, but most of the uses that I've seen that were deployable to this point have mostly been in written format. And I don't think you can go down the letter path because I think there's just entirely too many variables. I'm not sure that I would allow any large language model at this point to independently write anything and deploy it without it going through human eyes. But I do think that there's a value to assisting the individuals at that level. I attended a conference earlier this year where it was a lot of bankers and they were all talking about all the different ways in which they were using generative AI. And then one of the lawyers got up towards the end and basically said, like, hey, I'm not here to burst your bubble, but here's my pin to burst your bubble. Because ultimately, like, how many of you have written a policy around this, or how many of you have designed things that need to happen in conjunction to be able to use this type of technology? What kind of things are you putting in place to restrict that tool set's access to the amount, to the data that you're providing? And I think that there's just a lot of unanswered questions at this point. I think that there's some cool and interesting technology on the horizon, and there's 1,000 different use cases that I've seen that have been dreamt up and interesting. But I think the deployability of that technology to this point, maybe we'll see more in 2024, and we'll see that next iteration, right, of ChatGTP or whatever tool set people are using. I've been playing with Bard and looking at Google's
Hmm.
Bard as compared to SEO strategies, and I do struggle a little bit with if I give it two websites to rank and it gives me like all this information about ranking those two websites against each other, but then can't actually like tell me where any of that data came from, is a little frustrating. So I think that there's a lot of training and education, not just of the technology itself, but of the user of the technology. Because
Oh,
just
yes.
like the way that we search Google, right? Like I know that I've spent enough time not just searching on Google, but studying Google search algorithm to understand the to colon from colon, right? Like is there's 1,000 different commands that we can use in it, but that takes a lot of user training, right? Like Google's not changing what they're doing, but there are a lot of things that we can do within the prompts to better control the feedback or response that we get from a technology system. I think it'll be interesting to see how it evolves in 2024.
Oh, I agree. The evolving is that's the name of the game right now. It is in the process of evolving because AI has existed, the machine learning has existed before the last 18 months. I mean, it's been
Mhm,
around, except that it's been mostly within research development labs or, large server environments where they're playing with the technology, seeing what they can do.
mhm.
Now it's sort of there have been pieces that are released into the wild and people have seen it. So now it's part of our collective imagination. And before now, the only artificial intelligence people could remember would be like from the Terminator movies, right? Or
Yes.
Star Wars, R2D2, right? You got R2D2, the lovable droid, or you got the Terminator, the T-800 or T1, whichever it was. There are three movies. I can forget the models, but you know, it's like that thing comes
Fair.
and it's like, yeah, it's a machine. It's like, oh, it's here to kill you. It's like, okay, like, which is it? But that's what I think our human imaginations go towards because we
Mhm.
don't really know what that when you say it's an algorithm. Most people have no idea. If you show them an algorithm, show them photos of things and there's not like show me the algorithm. Most people can't pick one out, right? They don't know what it is. Talk about machine learning as an abstract concept. It's same thing, large language model. Oh, nobody knows. I mean, people have a hard enough time understanding the cloud, meaning like, oh, this is stored in the cloud.
Yes.
Like people think they know, and the problem is that people don't want to ask questions. So probably the best advice
It's-
all of your listeners could take away from our discussion right now is that they before before they get anywhere close to implementing anything with AI, they should take the time to become a better educated consumer of information about artificial intelligence, machine learning, and how it's deployed in the products that are they're trying to be sold to them. Because it's so easy to believe, the propaganda, the media, like, oh, this product does this, and I'm like, look, it's like people go and look at cars, right? Everyone knows it's a combustion engine, or maybe it's a hybrid or something, but people think they understand how a car works. Most people don't. It's like you put the key in the ignition or you push the button and you put it on the gas, right?
to operate it. They don't know how it
Right,
works.
operate. People are
It's
like, oh, and
different.
then there's a radio, right? Like, okay, well, let's talk about the combustion engine. Do you know how that works? What about the oil pan? What about the crankshaft? What about the starter motor? What about the alternator? Oh, what about like, okay, slip differential. What? Like,
Transmissions, yeah.
yeah, it doesn't mean you have to become a mechanic, but if you're going to go out and buy a car, it's worth listening and trying to sit back and pretend that you don't know everything and
Mhm.
just listen and ask questions. And everyone's smart. Everybody in our industry, they're smart. They're running a business. They got to make a lot of decisions. I've run a small business myself. Before I went to law school, I was in a bus business, right? I drove buses. I was a diesel mechanic. I know what it's like to run a small business. And there are a lot of decisions. And the technology part, that's just up here. You got to have good people. You got to have clients. You got to have, fundamentals that are solid. And then you're looking to improve things, but you got to
Mhm.
have a good foundation. Most people, if they focus on the fundamentals, the AI product or service that will help them most will become apparent in time
Mhm.
if they focus on the fundamentals, in my opinion.
Well, look, I agree with that in every aspect of life, right? Like stick to the fundamentals. The blocking and tackling is far more important than, being able to throw
Yep.
long bomb Hail Mary passes. But they come with a different level of success over time, because if you can do the fundamentals, you become a successful team. If you can't do the fundamentals, you find yourself always behind the eight ball, so to speak. Well, Nabil, I really appreciate you coming on and having this chat with me today. I feel like
Sure.
every conversation we have is more exciting than the last, and look
Kind
forward
of
to
you to say.
continuing to talk to you about artificial intelligence and kind of this intersection with legal over time, because I'm sure in 2024, we're going to have a whole lot more develop on this particular topic.
I think you're right about that. So the lesson for people is stay tuned. Things will evolve, and yeah, just focus on your fundamentals. Make sure you got good people you can trust, and good people you can talk to. And the rest of the stuff we can all figure out together.
Exactly. I love your approach. For those of you that are watching, if you have additional questions you'd like to ask Nabil or myself, you can leave those in the comments below on LinkedIn and YouTube. We'll be responding to those. Or if you have additional topics you'd like to see us discuss, you can leave those in the comments below as well. And hopefully, I'll be able to get Nabil to come back at least one more time to help me continue to create great content for a great industry. But
Happy to
until
do it.
next time, Nabil, I really appreciate you. Thank you so much for coming on today.
All right, take care, Adam. Bye bye.
And for all of you watching, we'll see you again soon. Thanks, everybody.